Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, scattered like breadcrumbs through our 3-year relationship. But I had been too busy trying to be everything Elena needed to notice she was suffocating under the weight of my devotion. The kitchen still smelled like the dinner I'd planned to cook, garlic and herbs from the farmer's market, Elena's favorite pasta waiting in the pantry. I had stopped at 3 different stores after my 12-hour shift at Children's Hospital, my scrubs still damp with sweat and the lingering antiseptic smell that never quite washes off. My feet ached, my back screamed from lifting patients. But I had been looking forward to this. To us. To the simple ritual of cooking together, sharing our day, being normal. Elena sat at our small dining table, laptop open, fingers flying across the keys with the intensity she brought to everything. Her dark hair was pulled back in that messy bun that meant she was stressed, and her jaw had that tight set that warned me to tread carefully. I knew that look. I'd been seeing it more and more lately. "Hey," I said softly, setting my work bag down by the door. "How was your day?" She didn't look up. "Fine." I waited for more, but nothing came. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, ready to snap. I moved to the sink, washing my hands with the methodical precision I'd learned in nursing school, trying to wash away more than just the hospital's residue. "I thought we could try that new recipe tonight," I offered, glancing at her over my shoulder. "The one with the mushrooms you liked." "David." Her voice carried a warning I chose to ignore. "Or we could order in. Whatever you want." I dried my hands, turning to face her fully. "I know you've been stressed with the product launch." "David, stop." I stopped. In the sudden quiet, I could hear the hum of our refrigerator, the distant traffic, my own heartbeat picking up pace. Elena finally looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. The bone-deep weariness of someone who had been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can't do what?" But even as I asked, I knew. We both knew. She closed her laptop with a soft click that sounded final. "This. Us. The way you." She gestured vaguely at me, as if my very presence was the problem. "The way you hover. The way you try to fix everything. The way you make me feel like I'm drowning in your good intentions." My chest tightened. "I don't understand. I'm just trying to take care of me." "I know." She stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked our small courtyard. "But David, I don't need to be taken care of. I need space to breathe, to exist without feeling like I'm disappointing you every time I'm not grateful enough, happy enough, present enough." The words hit me like physical blows. "I never said you disappointed me. You don't have to say it." She turned back to me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "It's in the way you look at me when I work late. The way you apologize when I'm in a bad mood, like it's somehow your fault. The way you anticipate my needs before I even know what they are." I stared at her, feeling something fundamental shifting beneath my feet. "I love you. I want to make you happy. That's the problem." Her voice broke slightly. "Every day with you feels like a burden, David. The burden of living up to this image you have of me, of us. I can't breathe under the weight of how much you love me." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt something crack inside my chest, a clean break that somehow felt like relief and devastation all at once. I looked at Elena, really looked at her, and saw a woman trapped not by circumstances or cruel fate, but by my relentless devotion. My love had become a cage. I smiled then, and I could tell it surprised her. It wasn't bitter or angry. It was sad, yes, but also strangely peaceful. "Then let me lighten it," I said quietly. She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. "What?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked to our small entryway and picked up my work badge from the hook by the door. The photo showed a younger version of myself, bright-eyed and eager on my first day at the hospital. I set it on the counter with the same care I'd use handling a patient's chart. "David, what are you doing?" I reached for my keys next, the small collection that represented our shared life. House key, mailbox key, the spare to Elena's car that I'd used maybe twice in 3 years. I placed them beside the badge. "You're right," I said, moving toward our bedroom. "You deserve to feel free." "Wait, that's not." "David, I didn't mean." But I was already pulling my old duffel bag from the closet, the one I'd used in nursing school. My hands moved without conscious thought, folding clothes with the efficiency I'd learned from years of 12-hour shifts. A week's worth of scrubs. Some jeans. The sweater my mom had given me last Christmas that Elena always said looked good on me. Stop. Elena appeared in the doorway, her voice panicked now. You don't have to leave. That's not what I meant. I paused, a pair of socks in my hands. What did you mean? She opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew there was no good answer to that question. I meant, she struggled, her composure finally cracking. I meant I needed you to understand. To give me space. Not to leave. Elena. I zipped up the bag and turned to face her. You just told me that every day with me feels like a burden. Do you want me to stay and make it heavier? That came out wrong. No, I said gently. It came out honest. I moved past her into the bathroom, gathering my toothbrush, my medication, the few things that were unmistakably mine. In the mirror, I caught a glimpse of Elena watching me, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been fear. Where will you go? She asked. Miguel's, probably. My brother had always kept his guest room ready for emergencies. I'd never thought I'd need it. For how long? I met her eyes in the mirror. I don't know. David, please. Can we just talk about this? Like adults? I finished packing my toiletries and walked back to the bedroom. Elena followed, her movements quick and agitated, like a bird sensing a storm. We are talking about it, I said, shouldering my bag. You told me the truth. I'm acting on it. But you can't just leave. We live together. We have plans. What about the lease? What about your happiness? I interrupted. What about the burden you feel every day? She fell silent, and I could see her mind racing, trying to find the words that would fix this. But some things couldn't be fixed with words. Some things were broken the moment they were spoken. I walked to our shared dresser and picked up the framed photo from our last vacation. Elena laughing at something I'd said, her arm around my waist, both of us squinting in the bright California sun. For a moment, I remembered what it felt like to believe we were happy. Keep it, I said, setting it back down. Keep everything. I don't want everything. I want. What do you want, Elena? I asked, and for the first time in our conversation, my voice carried an edge. Because 20 minutes ago, you wanted me to stop suffocating you. Now you want me to stay. What do you actually want? She stared at me, and I could see her struggling with the question. Maybe because she didn't know the answer. Maybe because she did, and it wasn't me. I pulled a notebook from my nightstand and tore out a page, writing quickly. You're right. You deserve to feel free. Take care of yourself. D. I left the note on her pillow, next to the book she was reading. Some self-help thing about finding your authentic self. The irony wasn't lost on me. David, wait. I paused at the bedroom doorway, bag in hand, looking back at the woman I'd loved with everything I had. She stood in the center of our room, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something together. I do love you, she said quietly. I know. And I did know. That was what made this hurt so much. But love isn't always enough, is it? I walked through our apartment one last time, past the kitchen where I'd planned to cook dinner, past the couch where we'd watched movies and argued about the thermostat, past the small dining table where Elena still sat with her laptop, building her career while I tried to build our life. At the front door, I turned back. Elena had followed me, keeping her distance but watching my every move. For what it's worth, I said, I never meant to make you feel trapped. I know, she whispered. And for what it's worth, I hope you find what you're looking for. I stepped outside and closed the door softly behind me. In the hallway, I could hear her through the thin walls, not crying, but moving around restlessly, like she couldn't decide whether to follow me or let me go. I chose for both of us. I walked to the stairs, down 3 flights, and out into the cool evening air. My car sat in its usual spot, and I threw my bag in the back with the same mechanical precision I'd used to pack it. As I drove away, I didn't look back at our building. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, on the traffic lights and the other drivers heading home to their own lives, their own complications. But I could feel the weight of Elena's choice settling over me like a heavy blanket. Every day with me felt like a burden. I'd spent 3 years trying to make her life easier, better, brighter. I'd anticipated her needs, smoothed her rough days, celebrated her victories like they were my own. And somehow, in all that loving, I'd forgotten to ask the most important question. Did she want to be loved like that? The answer, it turned out, was no. Miguel's house sat in one of those suburban developments where every lawn was perfectly manicured and every mailbox matched. It was the kind of place Elena had always said felt suffocating, too quiet, too predictable, too far from the energy of the city. As I pulled into his driveway, I understood why she'd felt that way. There was something almost aggressively normal about it. My brother appeared at the front door before I'd even turned off the engine, like he'd been watching for me. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. He just helped me carry my bag inside and showed me to the guest room that his wife Carmen kept ready for visiting relatives. "You hungry?" he asked, the first words either of us had spoken since I'd called him from the car. "Not really. Coffee." I nodded, following him to the kitchen. Miguel moved with the same economy of motion he brought to construction sites. No wasted energy, every action purposeful. He poured 2 cups of coffee and set them on the small breakfast table, then sat across from me. "Elena?" he asked. "Elena?" He nodded like that explained everything. Maybe it did. Miguel had only met her a handful of times, but he had the working man's instinct for reading people. He'd probably seen this coming before I did. "You want to talk about it?" I took a sip of coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. She said every day with me feels like a burden. Miguel's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't look surprised. "What did you say?" I told her I'd lighten the load. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So I left. Just like that. Just like that. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only existed between brothers. Outside, I could hear children playing in a neighboring yard, their voices bright and careless. Carmen was at her book club, Miguel explained when I asked about the quiet house. She'd be back later, probably with casserole recommendations from the other wives. "You can stay as long as you need," Miguel said eventually. "Thanks. But David," I looked up from my coffee, "don't make this about being a martyr. You're not doing Elena any favors by punishing yourself for loving her." His words stung because they carried a grain of truth I wasn't ready to examine. Had I been punishing myself? Or had I been so focused on being the perfect boyfriend that I'd forgotten to be myself? That night, lying in Miguel's guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the last 3 years of my relationship with Elena. I thought about the way I'd rearranged my schedule to match hers, how I'd learned to cook her favorite foods, how I'd become an expert at reading her moods and adjusting my behavior accordingly. When had taking care of someone become the same as losing yourself? My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Elena. "Can we please talk? This is crazy." I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to respond, to explain, to try one more time to make her understand. But what would I say? That she was wrong about feeling burdened? That her feelings weren't valid? I set the phone aside without responding. The next morning, I went to work. The children's hospital had always been my sanctuary, the place where my instinct to care for others felt natural and necessary. Here, my attention to detail could save lives. My anticipation of needs was a professional skill. My desire to comfort and heal was exactly what the job required. I was checking on Tommy Martinez, a 7-year-old recovering from surgery, when his mother grabbed my hand. "You look different today," she said in accented English. "Sad." I forced a smile. "Just tired, Mrs. Martinez. How's Tommy feeling?" She studied my face with the intensity that mothers brought to everything related to their children's welfare. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "when we take care of everyone else, we forget to take care of ourselves." Her words followed me through the rest of my shift. During my lunch break, I found myself in the hospital chapel, not because I was particularly religious, but because it was quiet and empty and I needed space to think. What did taking care of myself even look like? I'd been so focused on taking care of Elena for so long that I'd lost track of my own needs, my own desires. When was the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to? When was the last time I'd made a decision without considering how it would affect her first? I couldn't remember. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Elena. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. "Please come home so we can fix this." But what if it couldn't be fixed? What if the problem wasn't a misunderstanding, but a fundamental incompatibility? Elena needed space to be herself, and I needed. What did I need? I thought about the conversation with Miguel, about Mrs. Martinez's observation, about the way Elena had looked at me when she said I was a burden. Not angry, not cruel, just exhausted. Exhausted by my love. For the first time, I wondered if she might be right. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I went hiking. Alone. There was a trail about an hour outside the city that I'd bookmarked months ago, but never visited because Elena wasn't interested in outdoor activities. She preferred museums, wine bars, places where she could network and be seen. The trail wound through a state park filled with oak trees and wildflowers, leading to a small waterfall that emptied into a clear pool. I sat on a fallen log and listened to the sound of water over rocks, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. No one needed me here. No one was depending on me to anticipate their needs or manage their emotions. I was just David, sitting by a waterfall, existing without purpose or obligation. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. I pulled out my phone to take a picture of the view, then stopped. Who would I send it to? Elena wouldn't be interested. My coworkers didn't know this side of me existed. I'd become so defined by my relationship that I'd forgotten how to have experiences that weren't filtered through someone else's needs. I took the picture anyway, for myself. On the drive home, I stopped at a small jazz club I'd noticed before but never visited. Elena didn't like jazz, too unpredictable, she'd said. But I'd always been curious about it, drawn to the improvisation and emotional honesty of the music. The club was dark and intimate, filled with the kind of people who came to listen rather than be seen. I ordered a beer and found a small table near the back, letting the music wash over me. The pianist was a woman about my age, her eyes closed as she played, completely absorbed in the moment. I thought about Elena, probably at home working on her laptop, building her career with the same intensity she brought to everything. I thought about the note I'd left on her pillow, the keys I'd placed on the counter, the 3 years of shared life I'd walked away from in a single evening. Did I regret it? The honest answer was no. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed. Elena again. I saw Miguel at the grocery store. He said, "You're doing well. I'm glad. I miss you." I stared at the message for a long time, listening to the saxophone weave its way through a melancholy melody. Finally, I typed back, "I'm learning to miss myself." I hit send before I could second guess it. 3 weeks passed before I saw her again. I was at our usual coffee shop, though I supposed it was just my coffee shop now, reading the newspaper and enjoying a Saturday morning that belonged entirely to me. I'd started a routine: coffee, newspaper, then a visit to the farmer's market Miguel had recommended. Simple pleasures that Elena had always been too busy to enjoy. I was reading about changes in hospital funding when I felt someone watching me. I looked up to find Elena standing near the entrance, her eyes fixed on my table. She looked different, thinner, maybe, or just more fragile somehow. Her usually perfect hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she wasn't wearing makeup. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked over, her steps hesitant. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Can I?" She gestured to the empty chair across from me. I nodded, folding my newspaper and setting it aside. She sat down carefully, like the chair might break under her weight. "You look good," she said. "Thanks. So do you." It was a lie, and we both knew it. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping well, like she'd been carrying a weight she couldn't set down. "I've been meaning to call," she said. "But you didn't." "No." She twisted her hands in her lap. I didn't know what to say. I waited, giving her the space to find her words. It was something I'd learned in nursing. Sometimes the most important conversations happened in the silences. "I made a mistake," she said finally. "Which part was the mistake? Telling me how you felt, or letting it get to that point in the first place?" She flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "Elena, you told me that every day with me felt like a burden. That wasn't something you said in anger. That was something you'd been feeling for a while." I was stressed. The product launch was. "This isn't about work stress." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "This is about the fact that my love felt suffocating to you. And you know what? You were right." She blinked, clearly not expecting me to agree. "I was suffocating you," I continued. "I was so focused on taking care of you that I forgot you're a capable adult who doesn't need taking care of. I turned our relationship into something where my worth was measured by how much I could anticipate your needs." "That's not." She started to protest, then stopped. "Maybe. A little. A lot," I corrected. "And the worst part is, I thought that was love. I thought that was what being a good partner meant." "Isn't it?" I smiled sadly. "No, Elena. Love is supposed to make both people bigger, not smaller. I made myself smaller by defining my worth through your happiness. And I made you smaller by treating you like you needed constant care. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears. So what now? She asked. Now you figure out what you want without worrying about whether it disappoints me. And I figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be everything you need. But what about us? I reached across the table and touched her hand briefly, then pulled back. There is no us right now, Elena. There's you, and there's me, and we both have work to do. She left after that, walking out of the coffee shop with her shoulders hunched like she was walking into a storm. I watched her go and felt something I hadn't expected, relief. 2 weeks later, I ran into Sarah Kim from work at the farmer's market. She was examining tomatoes with the intensity she usually reserved for patient charts, her 4-year-old daughter Emma tugging on her sleeve. Dr. Chun, Emma announced, using the title all the kids at the hospital gave me even though I wasn't a doctor. Hey Emma, finding any good treasures? Mama's making sauce, Emma said seriously. But she doesn't know how to pick the good ones. Sarah laughed. Thanks for the vote of confidence, kiddo. She looked at me. What brings you here? I thought you lived downtown. I'm staying with my brother for a while. I picked up a tomato, testing its firmness, and learning that I actually like farmers markets. Divorce? Sarah asked with the directness that made her such a good nurse. Breakup? Long-term relationship? She nodded knowingly. Those are the hardest. You okay? Getting there. Emma had wandered off to examine a display of flowers, and Sarah lowered her voice. You know, when I first started at the hospital, you always seemed so settled. Content. I envied that. Really, really. But lately, you seem more like yourself. If that makes sense. It did make sense. More than I wanted to admit. Emma, stay where I can see you, Sarah called, then turned back to me. We're making homemade pizza tonight. Nothing fancy, but if you want company. I almost declined automatically. The old David, the one who would have checked with Elena first, who would have worried about imposing or sending the wrong message. But the new David, the one who was learning to exist without constant consideration of someone else's needs, smiled and said yes. Sarah's apartment was small and cluttered in the way that homes with children always are. Emma had claimed me as her sous chef, which mostly involved her standing on a chair beside me and offering commentary on my tomato slicing technique. You're really good with her, Sarah observed, watching Emma explain the proper way to arrange pepperoni. Kids make sense to me. They're honest about what they need. Unlike adults, I thought about Elena, about the months of careful management of her moods, the constant second-guessing of my own instincts. Adults have learned to hide their needs behind expectations and assumptions. Kids just tell you they're hungry or tired or scared. Speaking from experience? Recent experience. We ate pizza on Sarah's small couch while Emma told elaborate stories about her stuffed animals. It was chaotic and warm and completely different from the quiet dinners Elena and I used to share, where conversation felt like a negotiation and silence felt like failure. This is nice, I said as Emma dozed against my shoulder, exhausted from her day of market adventures and pizza making. It is, Sarah agreed. You should come by again sometime. Emma's already planning your next cooking lesson. I looked down at the sleeping child, her small hand still clutching a piece of crust, and felt something settle in my chest. This was what contentment felt like, not the anxious happiness I'd chased with Elena, but something quieter and more sustainable. When I got back to Miguel's house that night, I found a text from Elena waiting. I drove by the farmer's market today. Saw you with that woman and her daughter. You looked happy. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I am. She didn't text back. For months after I left, Elena was waiting by my car when I finished my shift at the hospital. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. She leaned against the driver's side door, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than I remembered. Hi, David. Elena. I kept my voice neutral, professional. How did you know I'd be here? I called the hospital, asked when your shift ended. She straightened, trying to project confidence, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. We need to talk. Do we? Yes. She stepped away from my car, giving me space to unlock it, but blocking my path to the driver's seat. I made a mistake. I set my work bag on the hood, studying her face in the parking garage's fluorescent lighting. She looked tired, older somehow, like the past few months had aged her in ways that sleep couldn't fix. "What kind of mistake?" I asked. "Letting you go? Letting us end like that?" She took a breath, steadying herself. "I've had time to think, David. To really look at what we had. What I threw away. What we had wasn't working, Elena. You said so yourself." "I was wrong." Her voice cracked slightly. "I was stressed and scared and I took it out on you. But these past few months, David, I've been miserable." I leaned against my car, crossing my arms. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" She stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of her perfume. The same one she'd worn for 3 years, the one that used to make me think of home. "Because you seem different. Distant." "I am different." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she'd intended. "Because of some principle? Because you're punishing me for one conversation?" I almost smiled at that. "Elena, do you think this is about punishment? Isn't it?" "No." I shook my head. "This is about recognition. About finally understanding what you were trying to tell me." She frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "I don't understand." "You were right," I said simply. "Every day with me was a burden. I made it a burden by trying to carry all the weight of our relationship by myself." "That's not." "It is." I held up a hand, stopping her protest. "Elena, I spent 3 years trying to be everything you needed. I anticipated your moods, managed your stress, arranged my entire life around making yours easier. And you know what? That's not love. That's not partnership. That's codependency." Her jaw tightened. "So this is my fault? For letting you take care of me?" "It's both our faults. You for accepting it, me for offering it. But the difference is, I've learned from it. And I haven't." I looked at her, really looked at her. The same Elena who had sat across from me in our kitchen 4 months ago, telling me she felt suffocated by my devotion. The same Elena who was now here, in a hospital parking garage, asking me to come back and suffocate her again. "Have you?" I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. "What do you want from me, Elena?" "I want us to try again. I want to fix this." "Fix what exactly?" "The fact that you don't love me the way I love you? The fact that my attention makes you feel trapped?" "That's not." She stopped, frustration flashing in her eyes. "Why are you being so difficult? I'm here, aren't I? I'm admitting I was wrong. You're here because you're uncomfortable with the consequences of your choice. That's not the same as being wrong." She stared at me, and I could see her struggling with something. "Finally," she said, "I miss you." "What do you miss about me?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. What do you mean?" "I mean, what specifically do you miss?" "My company. Our conversations. The way I made you feel. All of it." "Elena." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "The last time we had a real conversation, you told me that living with me felt like a burden. So what, specifically, do you miss about that burden?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her trying to find the right words. Words that would convince me, that would open the door she'd closed months ago. "I miss coming home to someone who cared about my day," she said finally. "You can get that from friends. I miss having someone who knew me well enough to anticipate what I needed. That's what you said was suffocating you. I miss." She struggled, her composure starting to crack. "I miss feeling important to someone." And there it was, the truth underneath all the other words. "Elena," I said quietly, "you were never important to me because of what you did for me. You were important because of what I could do for you. That's not love. That's not even a relationship. That's just servitude." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? Not what I wanted for us, or what I wanted for you, but what I wanted for myself." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "When was the last time you were curious about my dreams, my fears, my ambitions? When was the last time you saw me as a person instead of a support system?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know. Neither do I. And that's why this doesn't work, Elena. You don't miss me. You miss the idea of me. You miss having someone whose whole existence revolved around making your life easier." "But I could change," she said desperately. "We could change. I could be better." "Better at what?" "Pretending to be interested in who I am when I'm not trying to take care of you?" The words hung between us like a challenge. She stared at me, and I could see her trying to formulate an argument, a defense, a reason why this time would be different. But we both knew it wouldn't be. I don't understand, she said finally. You loved me. You said you'd always love me. I did love you. I probably always will, in some way. But Elena, I love myself more now. And I won't go back to being someone who measures his worth by how useful he is to someone else. So that's it. 3 years, and you just walk away? You walked away first, I reminded her. In that kitchen, when you told me I was a burden. I just made it physical. She leaned against a nearby car, suddenly looking exhausted. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. And you were right to mean it. I was making your life smaller by trying to manage every aspect of it. I was making my life smaller by defining myself through your needs. I picked up my work bag, but I'm not that person anymore. Who are you now? I thought about Sarah and Emma, about the farmer's market and the hiking trail, about the jazz club and the peace I'd found in Miguel's guest room, about all the small discoveries I'd made about myself when I stopped trying to be everything Elena needed. I'm someone who can be happy without making someone else's happiness my responsibility, I said. I'm someone who can love without losing himself in the process. She was crying now, silently, tears streaming down her face in the harsh light of the parking garage. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. So am I. Can we? She struggled with the words. Can we at least be friends? I looked at her one last time. This woman I'd loved with everything I had. This woman who had taught me the difference between loving someone and losing yourself in them. Maybe someday, I said, when you figure out who you are, when you're not trying to be the person someone else needs you to be. I got in my car and started the engine. Elena stood there in the parking garage, watching me through the windshield, her face a mask of grief and confusion. As I drove away, I didn't feel the crushing weight I'd expected. Instead, I felt something lighter, cleaner. Like a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. 6 months later, the pottery class met every Thursday evening in a converted warehouse downtown. I'd signed up on a whim, drawn by the idea of creating something with my hands that had nothing to do with medical procedures or patient care. The clay was stubborn and unforgiving, nothing like the compliant flesh and bone I worked with at the hospital. You're getting better at sintering, Maria, the instructor, observed as she watched me work the wheel. Less fighting, more partnership. I smiled, keeping my eyes on the clay. Learning to work with what I have instead of trying to force it into what I think it should be. Good lesson for life, too. It was. These past 6 months had been full of small revelations like that. Understanding that loving someone didn't mean controlling their happiness, that taking care of others was only healthy when it came from choice rather than compulsion, that I could be complete without needing someone else to validate my worth. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text from Sarah. Emma wants to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. Fair warning, she's planning to teach you how to make pancakes. I grinned, wiping clay from my hands before responding. Tell her I'll bring the chocolate chips. Sarah and I had been spending more time together lately. Not dating, exactly, but exploring the kind of friendship that might become something more if we let it. There was no urgency, no desperate need to define what we were or where we were going. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company, who could sit in comfortable silence or talk for hours without either of us feeling the need to manage the other's emotions. It was refreshing in a way that surprised me. Your bowl's looking good, Maria said, pulling me back to the present. You planning to keep this one? I looked down at the clay taking shape under my hands. Imperfect but sturdy, useful but not trying too hard to be beautiful. Yeah, I think I will. The class ended at 9, and I walked to my car through the cool spring evening. I'd moved out of Miguel's guest room 2 months ago, into a small apartment near the hospital. It was nothing like the place Elena and I had shared, smaller, quieter, filled with things I'd chosen for myself rather than for us. As I drove home, I passed the old coffee shop where Elena and I used to meet on Saturday mornings. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure at our old table. Elena, laptop open, working even at this hour. She looked the same as always, focused, driven, beautiful in that sharp-edged way that had first attracted me. For a moment, I felt an echo of the old longing. Not for her, exactly, but for the simplicity of that life, when my purpose was clear and my worth was measured in someone else's happiness. Then the light changed, and I drove on. At home, I made tea and settled on my small couch with a book, something I'd picked up because it interested me, not because someone else had recommended it. My apartment was quiet but not lonely, filled with the things that made sense to me. The pottery I'd made in class, photos from my hiking trips, the jazz albums I'd been collecting. My phone rang just as I was getting ready for bed. Miguel's name on the screen. "Hey," I answered. "Hey yourself. How was pottery class?" "Good. Messy. Therapeutic. Carmen wants to know if you're bringing anyone to dinner this weekend." I laughed. "Tell Carmen I'm working on it." "The nurse? Sarah?" "Maybe. We're taking it slow." "Good for you." There was a pause. Then Miguel's voice turned more serious. "You sound happy, David. Really happy. Not the kind you used to fake for Elena's sake." He was right. This happiness felt different, quieter, more sustainable. It wasn't the desperate joy of someone trying to convince himself everything was perfect. It was the steady contentment of someone who had learned to be okay with himself. "Thanks," I said. "For what?" "For letting me crash in your guest room. For not asking too many questions. For being my brother." "Anytime, man. Anytime." After we hung up, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Elena was probably still working, still building her career, still trying to figure out what she wanted from life. I hoped she was happy. I hoped she'd learned to breathe without feeling suffocated by someone else's love. But mostly, I hoped she'd learned to love herself the way I'd finally learned to love myself. Without conditions, without the need for external validation, without the exhausting work of being everything to everyone. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, pausing on Elena's name. I deleted her number months ago, but somehow I still remembered it. For a moment, I considered calling her, checking in, making sure she was okay. Then I set the phone aside and got ready for bed. Some chapters needed to stay closed, not out of anger or resentment, but out of respect for the people we'd become. Elena had taught me that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was just two people drowning together. And I had taught her, in my own stubborn way, that being loved shouldn't feel like a burden. We'd both paid a price for those lessons, but they'd been worth learning. As I turned off the lights, I thought about tomorrow, my shift at the hospital, where my instinct to care for others could serve a clear purpose. Dinner with Sarah and Emma, where I could enjoy someone's company without feeling responsible for their happiness. The weekend pottery class I'd signed up for, where I could create something beautiful without needing anyone else to validate its worth. Simple pleasures. A simple life. But it was mine, built on the foundation of who I actually was rather than who I thought I needed to be for someone else. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. I'd learned to lighten my own load. And in doing so, I discovered something Elena had been trying to tell me all along. The weight of words, of expectations, of love given without wisdom, could crush the very thing it was meant to protect. But when that weight was lifted, when two people learned to stand on their own before trying to stand together, what remained wasn't emptiness. It was space. Space to breathe, to grow, to become the people they were meant to be. And sometimes, space was the most loving gift you could give someone, even if it meant letting them go.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.